Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader. Today we're going to look at mint on card vintage Star Wars action figures. Some graded, some not graded. Most of these are from AFA/CIB, which they've seemed to have been listing a lot of auctions lately for very nice high grade items. I don't know if it's one particular owner that sent them all into AFA to be graded and then had AFA list them for sale on eBay. I have no idea, but it does make you wonder, right? It's something that we've talked about in past videos on how there is integration along the entire channel of collectibles, whether it's the grading of collectibles, the distribution of collectibles, the auctioning off of collectibles. So, you know, AFA is owned by the same company that owns Hakes, and AFA apparently also does take consignments to list on eBay. So it's becoming a lot more integrated. And CGC, same thing. They just bought James Spence Authentication for autograph authentication. And it's just a big mishmash as the collectibles industry matures. And these grading companies are trying to build up scale to figure out new revenue streams. But for whatever reason, AFA does list stuff on eBay. To me, I think that it must be because Hakes is so backlogged with so many items for their upcoming auction, and the particular owner of these items does not want to wait for 6 months or 9 months until Hakes has the bandwidth to list them on their website. Maybe there's a difference in consignment costs and auction fees, things like that, but it's just something I've been thinking about, and I'm sure it's going to continue to get more and more interesting as these grading companies try to figure out new ways to make money. All right, let's dig in. The first one we've got is from LJ's Card Shop, trusted seller I've bought from my own, on my own, with the Bosk proof card graded AFA 85. That was probably about 6 months ago. I don't know when. But this is a beautiful mint and sealed box rebate offer for the Hoth Wampa. Look how clean that flap is on the Wampa, and then it has that $1 rebate sticker, so this is kind of a variant. AFA 80 for this one. That one sold for $667 and change. Pretty good deal. They also had the open belly version of the Tauntaun. So this is the second iteration of the Tauntaun, showing Luke popping in there. I thought they smelled bad on the outside. Anyway, this one was graded AFA 80 as well, still mint and sealed box, and that one also sold for about the same price, $666.87. This one was $667.85. It makes you wonder whether it's the same buyer who bought both of them, but that gives you a rough price point to aim for both of those Hoth-related creatures. Next up, let's dig into CIB's items. This is these auctions were about 3 or 4 days ago. This was a 12-back C Stormtrooper, graded AFA 80, punched example, no price sticker, clear blister. Very, very nice condition. Straight 80s for the sub-score. A little bit of pink to the limbs, which is common for these Stormtroopers. As a side note, if I remember, I'll put a link to Reserved Investments' recent video that talked about the toy market and how he thinks that if you're going to invest in the toy market, to stay away from mint-on-card white figures. Where have you heard that before? That's something that I've talked about myself. So I just thought it was interesting. And he talked about, you know, there's all kinds of ways to play it, but there's dangers inherent in buying these vintage old toys that could still degrade even though they've been graded. So it's a lot of the same stuff that you hear from me, but it's interesting to hear it from someone on the outside who doesn't focus their collecting time and their YouTube channel on Star Wars collectibles. But he talked about Star Wars, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Masters of the Universe, and which ones he thought were more inherently risky as investments long-term. And he said that Star Wars is basically, you know, he hated to use this phrase, but the blue chip of toy collecting. And, you know, the market is very mature for Star Wars toys, obviously, and probably is as safe a bet as any, relative to maybe some of the slight inherent risks for some of those other toy lines I just mentioned. This one did sell for $20.62 and change. They also had the die-cast Darth Vader's TIE Fighter, graded AFA DCA 70. Remember, in the last video covering some of AFA's items, they had that prototype small winged version of the Vader TIE Fighter on the regular TIE Fighter card back that sold for big money. I forgot the number now, but many thousands of dollars. But this is just the standard issue Darth Vader TIE Fighter, yellowed blister, DCA 70. That one sold for $202.50, probably about right. I mean, you know, it's a fairly low-grade yellowed blister. Next up is a beautiful Imperial Cruiser, the die-cast Imperial Cruiser, mint in seal box, graded DCA 75. This is one I had in my own collection sealed. Mine was a DCA 70. But I've got a loose graded one back from CAS that I haven't shown on the channel yet. So whenever I get my act together, I'll show that. I did finally get it back after it had to get recased because it broke in shipping. But it looks really nice. And that one's graded CAS 85 plus. But that's a loose graded. This is mint in seal box, which is obviously more desirable. That one sold for $615, almost exactly what I sold mine for way back in the day. That was a CAS 70 plus or something like that. Here's one that I thought was interesting that went for a little higher than I expected. I kind of had an interest in it because I like the 41A backs, the Survival Kit offer backs. This was a 41A for the Hoth Rebel Commander, graded AFA 80. And I thought maybe I had a chance at it because the blister score was 75. And you can see some obvious bad rippling or, you know, maybe an overheating that happened with that blister at the top there. It was unpunched, no price sticker, so I was like, man, maybe it stays a little low. You know, if it stays in that 350, 400 range, maybe I'll throw in a wild bid on it. But it blew past that number and sold at 553. Probably not a number I could be comfortable with, to be honest with you. A little higher than I would be willing to go for something that looks like that. I mean, I think, unfortunately, it just doesn't present as nice as I would like. I much prefer to have a card that wasn't as perfect and have a blister that was in better condition than this one if I'm going to be dropping $550 on it. Personal opinion on it, though. But I mean, it's a very nice item. I certainly understand why somebody paid that. Just not something I would do for how it presents. It's, you know, a lot of it's just how it presents, right? This is unpunched, no price sticker, so I think the card is obviously amazing. Figure's fine. But because the blister is just so rippled, it looks like someone held a lighter to it and just kind of started to wrinkle. To me, I'd rather have the blister looking better and suffer with either a punch card or slight creases to the card, and it presents a lot nicer than maybe this one does. But personal opinion, $553 on that one. Mint and seal box land speeder. This was graded AFA 85, so very high grade. This is the collector series version. That one sold for $710, which is as low as I've seen that. We've seen a couple of high grade examples about this grade that have sold $900 plus. I think we might have even seen one late last year that sold for $1,200. That was an AFA 85. So that's really come back down to earth a little bit at $710. And again, part of it might be because there were so many awesome items ending at the exact same time. AFA/CIB had loose graded, really nice Lily Letties going. They had all these mint on cards that I'm covering here. So maybe this one just got lost in the shuffle since it's a fairly common item. And remember, that's a good strategy to use, not only on eBay, but also in the Hakes auctions. Pick out something that you like, that is fairly common, that you've been looking for, while all these other hot vinyl Cape Jawas and everything else are selling. And sometimes they'll slip through the cracks. Here was a beautiful Princess Leia Bush disguised, unpunched. It did have, unfortunately, some kind of sticker residue in the upper right-hand corner, which really detracted, I think, from the aesthetics of it. But somehow it still got the 80 score for the card. Blister 85, figure 80. Only very slightly yellow. That one sold at $350. That's about right. I think if it didn't have that kind of sticker residue in the upper right, it probably would have gone $450 plus. So $350 is probably about right. This is one I was also interested in, and I don't know why I didn't bid on it. $305 was about where I thought it would end up. I was thinking $275 to $300, but I don't know what I was doing that night. It always ends on Sunday night, and Sunday night is like complete chaos at my household. My kids are arguing because they've been together since Friday afternoon. My wife's planning the next week. She's got my life planned for the next 8 days straight. And I've got literally just everything running through my head. And then by Sunday evening, I'm exhausted. And so I probably just forgot about it. But it was a really nice example. Clear blister, 77 back A, sold for $305, which is about what I expected. Here was an AFA 75 size Snoodles band. And so, you know, not the highest grade. It did have some tears on the bottom there. Surprised it still got the 75 despite those pretty major creases there. That sold for $400, which that's about what they go for ungraded. So I think, honestly, this was probably a little overgraded. Between the massive crease on the back, which I think the 75 would be okay if that was all it was wrong with the box. But the front of the box very clearly either has tears or really bad color-breaking creases on the bottom there. So I don't think it's a 75 box, personally. That's my personal opinion. I think this is more like a 70. But it got the 75, and $400 reflects the fact that maybe it presents a little not as nice as a 75 should. I would think a 75 would probably go $600 plus. Next up was a beautiful Palatoy 45C Luke Bespin with the brown hair, and this was graded AFA 75, about right with all the edge wear on the bottom and the top and around the hang tab. That one sold for $396, very fair price, a price that I would have been very comfortable with if I had been looking. 75, 75, 80 were the sub scores. See, I thought this one was fairly graded, okay? So some of them are overgraded, some of them are fairly graded, some of them might be undergraded, but I thought this one was very fairly graded for what it was. Beautiful foreign card back, $396 was a fair price. Here was a Han, graded AFA 80, and this one was unpunched, no price sticker, yellowed blister, obviously, sold for $255, which that's kind of a low price if you ask me. It was the plain lapel. The plain lapel tends to go for less, has been my experience, versus the camo lapel. Mint on card, that's just kind of what I've experienced, but maybe I'm wrong on that. But $255 for that one. We had a Wicket that was graded near mint 80, and it was graded as clear blister, but obviously it had yellowed since grading. And even despite that, it still sold for $418, which I think, personally, this is probably an overpay. You can get this in this condition ungraded for like $200 to $250 all day long. So $418, maybe a slight overpay, but, you know, it is what it is. It was certainly a nice one. This one I thought was a really good deal. This one probably went a lot less than I was expecting. I was expecting kind of $700 to $750 on this one. This was a tri-logo AFA 80 Darth Vader. Very, very nice example. Now, the head was turned to the side, which probably detracts a little bit from the aesthetics. He's like looking at his Force Ghost for Yoda. I don't know, but very bizarre how his head was turned like that. Probably a Spanish PvP inside there, too, if I had to guess. But anyway, got the 80 grade, and you can see there 85, 80, 85 for the sub scores. 536, though, if you could live with a head turn like that, you know, I understand why it went for what it did, because it doesn't present nearly as nicely with that head turn, but it's something I've been willing to deal with at that price. That's a pretty good price there. That's about what I paid for mine, maybe a little less. That's a little bit more than what I paid for mine ungraded that got an 80 with CAS. So I thought that was a pretty good deal. Next up was the Droids Side Gunner. What a bizarre box art. This guy looks so... Look at his face. I mean, that face looks so stupid. Ugh, that is just the most hideous box art. $495 on that one. That was graded AFA 80, mint and seal box. And then we had some Power of the Force that sold. This was an AFA 75 B-Wing palette for $205.50. Again, probably about right. Very, very common. Probably the most common Power of the Force mint on card there is, but it presented pretty nicely. This was the shocker. I could not believe this final sales price. This was an AFA 85 Lando Calrissian General. Now, it was unpunched with no price sticker, and the blister was only very faintly yellowed. I mean, very, very faint. So it is beautiful. I mean, it is beautiful. And it's an AFA 85, straight 85s for the sub score. $15.25 in an auction. I could not believe that price. That is easily double what I was expecting. I was expecting at the top end $750, maybe $800. If you're feeling really lucky or you had a good day at the office, maybe $850. But I would, no way I'd touch $15.25 for that. I'm sorry. That's just not, you're not going to get your money out of that. No way. And I get it. Some people just want straight 85 items and they're willing to pay whatever it takes, and I get it. So have at it. But that's not something that I would pay. I would not pay $15.25 for that. I've got a few other ungraded before we wrap things up. This one is a Barada mint on card with a price sticker, unpunched yellowed blister that sold at $270, which is a good deal for a mint on card example. I didn't look too closely at it, but it looked to be in pretty good condition, 75 plus or maybe even an 80, I would say. Pretty good deal on that one. Same seller had the A-Wing palette, unpunched with that UFO style hanger tab that's a little bit larger. Again, easily an 80, I would say. That sold for 400-ish. Another pretty good deal on that one. A Monomon was punched with a very heavily yellowed blister, and that one sold for almost $500, which is probably in line with market. You know, it did have some sticker litho issues down here in the lower right that could probably come off with a little bit of letter fluid, but that's what it is. This one was an AFA 80 Plus archival case Gamorrean Guard 65 back A with only very faint yellowing. It got the yellow designation on the label, but I think it's just the inner tray that is yellowed. The outer blister looks fine to me. It's unpunched, no price sticker. That one sold for $3.85. So, you know, it went for a pretty decent amount, just given how nice it was. And here's a good angle that shows you the blister is perfectly clear, but that inner tray had yellowed. So when that happens, AFA does give it the yellow designation, unfortunately. 80, 80, 85 for an overall 80 plus archival case as well. So maybe that'll keep it from yellowing for at least a few years. But that was a very nice example of the Gamorrean Guard. Here was a Forlom that looks to still be clear blister. You know, it might be slightly starting, but this one was another 65 back that sold for $288. Pretty good deal on that one. And then finally, we had Lumat. I don't know why they were out of order, but here's one more from CIB. This was the Lumat that was graded AFA 80, yellow blister, obviously. The figure score got a 75 because it did have the torso discoloration, which Lumat is famous for. I showed you my Tri-Logo example that had the exact same issue. So a very common problem with Lumat, even mint on card, is that they discolor just like Luke Stormtrooper, just like Princess Leia, and it's just something you got to deal with. But it's still got the 80 overall, despite the figure score being a 75, and I think it's definitely an overall 80, just given how beautiful this card back is. I always like the pink. I don't know what it is. I love the pink on the background and on the name pill. Really pops. That one sold for $350. Another very good deal there. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this look at recent sales. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll be back soon.